Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about reading to critique. I've been leading a writers group for over 2 years now, which means that monthly I read at least 4 works, sometimes more, and I critique them. So today I wanted to talk about how do you approach somebody else's writing in a way that's nice yet constructive and helps them grow as a writer. First of all, let's talk about submitting your work for critique. Who do you want to read your work and give you feedback? So a lot of people are going to tell you, don't give it to your mom, don't give it to your family members, don't give it to your friends, because they will not be able to give you honest opinion. And I somewhat agree with this, and I also disagree. So I agree in a way that yes, it could be difficult to critique the work of somebody you know well and who you have a relationship with independent of the writing process. Because obviously, what if you don't like their work at all? What if you hate it? How do you communicate that? And if you don't communicate that, then what's the point of critiquing? But if you do communicate that, what's going to happen to your relationship? And as for the mom part, everybody's saying, well, if you give it to your mom, she's going to say it's great and it's not going to be really helpful feedback. So definitely consider who you want to give it to. But at the same time, I feel like if you kind of know the level of writing that somebody has, I'm talking now from the standpoint of the reviewer, right? So if I know my friend and I know that my friend is a writer, if I've seen at least a page of their work or some excerpts on their Instagram or something, and I know that they can write, and I know that their writing is at the level that I will be able to provide something positive in addition to some constructive feedback, then I'm kind of okay with it. But yeah, with family members, it can get complicated. So for example, I once sent my own work, a couple of pages, to my siblings, and two of my siblings came back to me and said something, and this third person just didn't say anything. So why? Did they hate it? Did they just not care to share their feedback? Did they not read it? Like, it can get a little weird. So definitely choose who you want to give your work to, because the goal of giving your work to somebody to critique is to make the writing stronger. So just consider, is this person going to be able to advise me on that, to tell me that something works or something doesn't? They don't have to be into writing themselves. Maybe they are readers, or maybe they are familiar with the topic you're writing about. There's got to be something about their feedback that's going to be helpful for you in some way. And so consider that when you choosing the people. But also, sometimes it's just about having some people read your work, right? And there are a lot of communities online you can find better readers on, but you can also join probably one of your local groups. So my group meets at the library once a month, and there's no pressure to come every month. There's no pressure to read. We always use trigger warnings, for example, because there might be some complicated topics like politics or religion or some traumatic stuff that's being talked about in their piece. So in that case, we just disclose that, and every person can make a decision if they want to read it and talk about it. So consider that too, and also consider your mental state. Are you stable? Are you confident enough in your writing ability and in who you are, where you are in life in general, to receive feedback that might not always be positive, that might be negative, and that might tell you that you need to work more on something? Because that's what critique is for. It's not going to be all praise. Hopefully, there will be some praise, but you have to be mentally prepared that some of it is not going to sound great, not going to make you feel great, maybe. And I've had people in a very vulnerable state attend writing group, and I have to say, in this situation, it's honestly almost impossible to provide honest feedback, because you can tell from the way the person behaves, from their work, that they're in a really precarious place in their life right now, and you don't want to be the one who sends them off the edge or like makes them feel any worse in any way. So you will not be providing completely honest feedback in that case. So there's definitely balance there, and there's definitely some things to consider when you are submitting and when you are reading and providing feedback. So think about that. There are times when I think it helps to create in silence, in peace, without getting anybody's feedback. And there's time when you're like, okay, so it's good enough that other people can read it, but I feel like I can make it better. And it's okay if I need to make it better. I'm prepared mentally that there's going to be more work. That's a good time to go get some critique. And of course, when you're receiving this kind of feedback, you don't have to take everything to heart. You are absolutely in your right to completely ignore everything everybody's saying. But then again, what is the purpose of a critiquing session? You probably want to hear some feedback. And if you, especially if you hear multiple people point out a specific issue they had or some unrelatability or something else that doesn't work for them, that's probably good food for thought. Today and over the next couple of days, I will be reading the work that I received pretty recently. And when I say pretty recently, it's been probably a couple of weeks. And I feel like this needs to be done because that's another aspect of it. You don't want to have the person waiting for too long because it's riddled with so much anxiety just giving your work to somebody and then not hearing back for a while, because that's where some people will probably start having doubts or like, why is nobody saying anything back? Like, you know, and people might just be busy with their lives, as it was the case for me. The reason I haven't really read it yet, I started, but I haven't proceeded further, is not because I didn't like it. I actually did like the first several pages that I read. It's just I was so busy with my own stuff that I didn't find time to do that. But now I will be doing it, and you'll be doing it with me. So at first I will try to read without providing any feedback. I will try to read as a reader. And because I know that I am to provide feedback at some point, it sometimes can get tricky. And some things, if I notice them, I will have the itch to scribble something down. And I probably will, but I will try most of the time to kind of step away and just be a reader for a while, because it's very important to just read it first to get a general feel and like understand the style, I guess, and the structure, and just enjoy whatever it is, the work that it is. And then at stage two, I'll actually go through that and look at it with my editor's eye. I'm no editor, of course, but I do love language. I love writing. I like reading. I like sentence structure. I like characters. I like character development, all of that. So I will look at that at some point. But first, let's just read. One of the simplest and best things to do when requesting critique is to let the person know what it is exactly you're looking to get out of it. Is it comments on characters, on how old they read? Is it line edits? Is it style? Is it just general impression? Give me all you got. You know, what is it? Just let them know so they can keep it in mind when they are commenting on your work. So it's 2 days later and I finished reading the work. It has about 90 pages, so it wasn't a quick read. Normally for my critique session, I ask them to submit around 2 to 4 pages, sometimes up to 10, but 90 is definitely a big jump from that. So it took me a little bit of time, but I finished my read-through, my first read-through. And I'm not really given any feedback, but I did notice some things already, some typos or an accidental error in the character name, like the author meant one character and they actually used another character's name, stuff like that, little things like that. But most importantly, I formed my opinion about the work. And speaking of the request of the person who submitted this work for feedback, it's just a very, very general feedback. So the question was basically, is it worth it? And you know, this is such a philosophical question for any creator. Is it worth it? I think what she's trying to understand is what she's writing readable, and does it seem like a beginning of an interesting story? And in my opinion, it is. But there are some things that complicate my feedback because it is a relative of mine. Some of the references that they have in the book, they are based on our shared life experience. So I know I cannot be objective about it. I cannot assess whether this particular bit works or not, because it works for me because I know exactly what they're talking about. But I don't know for a person who hasn't had this experience, is it going to work for them? So because of that, I'm happy that they have other people reading their work. I believe there are 13 different readers that they have. And so it's great because these people are like very diverse in how they relate to the author and kind of what they share, what experiences they share. So judging by the feedback from all 13, I assume the author will be able to make an informed decision on what is working and what is not. Now that I finished reading those 90 pages, I'm going to start working on my comments. The first thing I will do is write a general feedback. So it's going to be summing up my feelings, my thoughts on this piece in 1 or 2 paragraphs. And then after that, I will go through the text. I will not go super into details. I think I'll just comment on the things that really jump at me. Just because there are so many pages, I'm not going to go into like detailed commenting like editor mode because I don't think that's where she is currently. Her main request is just to honestly just to get the general feedback, but I also want to point out some things I noticed that she might use later when she's revising. So that's what I'll be doing right now. By the way, I'm writing in Russian because the work was in Russian, and so yeah, this was a change for me because I'm so used to text in English, but you know, as a native Russian speaker, that should be just fine. Okay, so now that I've finished my general feedback, I'm gonna read through it. I'm not gonna read exactly what I wrote, but I kind of give you a gist of what kind of topics I touched upon. So my general feedback was that I think this is a good book, a good beginning, and that it's totally worth to continue it. I noticed, like for me personally, as a writer, the beginning is always the easiest part of the book. I get excited. I love the moment of entrance into the, like writing fantasy specifically. I love the moment of entrance into the parallel world or the first contact the main character has with something magical. Like, I just love all this stuff. And usually for me, it gets much harder once we go to the second act. And I feel like this book, on the contrary, maybe the beginning is not as fleshy and it doesn't like really grip you and hook you into the story right away. But the more you read, the more invested you become in the story. So I think that's a strength. And you know, you can always rewrite the beginning to be more like catchy, but it's the essence of the book that really shows in the second act, I believe, that makes it a strong candidate, you know, to become an actual book. And so I wrote that. I did mention that because of our shared experience, I won't be able to comment on whether some of the scenes work, and it would be interesting for the author to hear from other people if they think it works. Then I said that I think that the main character and the character sidekick seem like good three-dimensional characters. I do have a question about the main character's motivation, because even though the main character has a good backstory and you know they seem pretty real, I don't know if I got exactly why they would get involved in the plot. You know, why would they step into this journey and take it? I also noticed, and it's interesting because it might be connected to my own book, but because I might be making the same mistake, so to say. But basically, when the magical things do start to happen, I noticed the main character just kind of takes it as granted. So, as opposed to like struggling more, because if you lived your entire life not knowing magic exists and not believing in anything, and then something really weird happens to you, there's gotta be a lot of struggle with that, right? You would have to approach it from multiple viewpoints. Like, am I going crazy? Is that like you would fall back onto your relationship with unusual things in general, like what's your relationship with God, what's your relationship with paranormal, like are you a believer, are you an atheist, like what kind of person you are, and like how much, knowing that something unusual exists in the world, how much would that rattle you, depending on what kind of person you are. So I felt like a little bit more of that would be more believable than just like accepting it and just moving along, So I commented on that. And I did mention that I do like, we haven't met the actual villain yet, but like we have, I believe, some puppets, of the puppet master deployed throughout. And so I mentioned that overall I enjoyed the little scenes or hints with the puppets. And what else? I made a guess about where I think the story is going, because I feel like when a person is, especially if there's a little bit of mystery, like a mystery element in the story, I've seen in my writers group that people who are writing this type of thing, they enjoy the guesses that the readers have, because it also tells them like how obvious they are being with their plot line, because you want to keep the reader on the edge, right? And so you don't want it to be too obvious, but you also don't want it to be entirely, hard to guess. And so there's a balance there. And so I feel like it helps to see what the reader got already from the text that you already have, so that you can either scale back on being on like some facts and hints, or add more if they're totally confused and thinking in a completely different direction. So I feel like that helps. And then I talked about the style a little bit. I've noticed like in some parts of the story, which are supposed to be stylistically similar, but there are many different characters communicating in those parts. And I feel like they all kind of sound the same in a way. And so I commented on that maybe it doesn't have to be done during the first draft, obviously, but like future revisions, I would assume like giving them a little more of a unique voice would help. And then I had a question about the audience age, because I don't know if it reads as an adult fantasy, but also a little bit as YA. So it's a little unclear, and there's some strong language used a couple of times. So that part kind of, I couldn't quite place it, and I don't know if the author wants to place it, or if they want to kind of merge. Yeah, not sure, but I just mentioned my impression of that. And I complimented the author's ability to employ flashbacks and all sorts of information dumps. Are a difficult thing, because you don't want to really make your text heavy with all of this background information. So I feel like she was able to incorporate those scenes without really taking away from the main plot line, which was very nicely done. So I mentioned that. And then I said that overall, I believe in this project. I think it's very interesting. I would love to finish reading it. And she mentioned that this could be just the first book of a big series. So regarding that, I did mention that from what I've heard, it's really difficult as a debut author to pitch a series, because nobody wants to make such a gamble, to such a bet, until they know that it really sells. And so she probably knows that, but I did recommend finishing the first book in a way that it could be a standalone, and then if it takes off, then you can always add more. So that was my general feedback, and now all is left is just going through the text and just leaving those more detailed comments, like little line edits or stylistic suggestions or typos and things like that. But since she mainly wanted general feedback, that's what I'm gonna mainly provide. And then once she has her questionnaire ready, then I'll answer if there's anything that I haven't commented on yet. But that is going to be it for me today. This is how I read to critique. I try to be supportive when I critique, but I also try to find the pain points, to find something that could definitely be made better. I think that for critique to be efficient, you do need to comment on things that maybe are not working. And so I'm hoping that my feedback is going to be both encouraging and helpful in maybe correcting some things in future revisions that might not be working. And I also am very curious about what other people are going to say, and I'll wait till she gets all the feedback and I'll ask her overall if there was something that everybody said. I'm very curious about that. I think it's just such a fascinating process. And I just had a writing group yesterday and we had such a fantastic discussion. There are only 5 of us, which actually is like such a good size of a group. And because we were able to like really go in depth with everybody's works, and we talked so much about like just human nature and like different personal things, but also like in relation to the works that we were discussing. It was just great. And we're all like very different people, but at the same time, we are connected by this desire to tell stories and to write. And so there's something special about finding this community and just getting feedback from multiple people. It's just so interesting to hear everybody's perspectives. One work I read yesterday, like for me, I thought it was a very short work. It was just 1 page, right? It was kind of like a short, like almost like flash fictions. I wouldn't even call it short story because, yeah, it was more like a poetic flash fiction. And the way I perceived it, like I thought it was so obvious what it was referring to. I had doubts about like one element of the story, but like otherwise I thought like, oh, this is just so obvious what it's about. And then we started talking about it, and everybody actually had their own interpretation of what it was, which was the intent of the author. And he's an amazing writer, and he really wanted, and that's how it is with classics and like all sorts of great works like this, that sometimes the strength of the work is in how universal it is and how the reader is going to be the one who's interpreting it and really is deriving the meaning from the work, putting something of themselves into the work, and possibly finding something that the author actually did not intend, right? That's how good literature actually works. And I am not, that's not the kind of literature I write. I think mine is much more pragmatic or like clear, obvious what I'm trying to say, and that's fine too. But I do enjoy works like that where you are not sure and your view could be very different from other people's view. So I'm curious to hear how other readers are going to interpret my relative's work and what they're going to say, because that's gonna that's gonna inform me as well. So as I'm critiquing, I am using my knowledge of writing of stories, of how it's supposed to be done. But then hearing other people's perspective might teach me something, me as a reviewer, if I get to hear from other people. So because it's a close relative of mine, I'll be able to ask her what the other people said, and hopefully she'll share. But yeah, this is such a cool experience. And honestly, I feel like as writers, we learn so much from reading other people's works and providing feedback. And not just the works that are already published, already good, works that are in the process of being molded, and you can be the one who possibly makes it stronger. How exciting is that? So I love to critique. This is, sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm not in the mood of reading anything. And, it takes me a little bit of effort to kind of like get me there. But once I do start, even if it's like, honestly, to be honest with you, even if it's really badly written, I can always find something to say that's like also encouraging and stuff. Not to say that this work was badly written, it was not. But what I mean is that it's possible to critique different levels of work, honestly. So, anyways, if you do have a chance to participate in a writers group, I highly recommend that. If you are already doing that, let me know in the comments how it's going. Like, what kind of, like, do you find people with similar style and genre as you? Because some people do that. Do you just like meet locally with whoever. That's kind of how my group works. We have people who write in nonfiction, people who are writing fantasy, mystical, thrillers, psychological things, genre fiction, literary fiction, all sorts of different things. And I feel like there's value to that too. But I know some people prefer to work within a genre because they're so familiar with the conventions and they feel like they can contribute more. Definitely a personal choice. So just let me know if you like to critique, how you do it. Is your approach very different from mine? Let me know. Maybe I can improve mine. And thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!